want to stop?
Well, let's go check out the herb stand.
Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, I guess these guys are really busy, but they have lots of peppers and lots
Mm-hmm.
of things. The gingers over there.
Ah, oh, I see it.
Do you want to walk through this tent?
Yeah, let's go take a look on our way over. Wow. And to believe that it's only just 9 o'clock and there's so many people at the market already.
It's perfect.
They know to come early.
Wow, this is an amazing amount of herbs.
Look at all of that.
Really awesome. I come here, I bought so many plants here, and I'm like, you get plant lust. I have 100% plant lust. It's dangerous to bring me here. I understand that. You're excited about it. So let's see if we can ask the farmer about the herbs you were looking for. The cilantro. Hi, how are you today?
Hi there, good afternoon, good morning.
We were looking for a specific type of cilantro.
Would you happen to carry any cilantros here?
We have just the typical cilantro.
But there's one that doesn't
would have
bolt.
like Vietnamese,
Ah.
but that's
Okay.
But there's one that doesn't bolt, and there's a culantro.
culantro.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have.
All right.
This is culantro.
Yep.
And flavor-wise, what would you say is the difference between cilantro and culantro?
It's quite a bit different. I mean, this is like the shadow benny, which a lot of times you see in stores. It's got like a bigger leaf as opposed to cilantro comes in bunches.
I see.
That's amazing. In Mexican food, they use culantro.
They use both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of depends. Like, we'll make like what do you call it? What's the soup base that's made in the cubes? Sofrito. They'll use like culantro.
Oh, cool.
Oh, so that's excellent. So the culantro is more of a cooking herb, and sometimes the cilantro is used as a finishing or fresh herb.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I guess.
That doesn't bolt. You know how this bolts?
Yeah, well, this time of year, it won't.
Right.
As now that it's cooled off a little bit, it's the heat.
That makes it bolt.
Yeah.
But it was called like cilantro. I can't remember the name.
Ooh, lavender. You always want to rub the leaf of an herb to get an idea of what the flavor would be like, so you can smell it. And actually, this smells a little bit like lavender to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, we don't use any.
See some basil, some sage, some mint. I think that one's flat leaf. No, curly parsley there.
Rosemary coming up to season now.
All of these will add a nice boost to your food in terms of flavor, and also they're really good for their antioxidants. Beautiful.
Tomatoes at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. Lots of potatoes, see? You would say you're digging out potatoes.
Right, lots of
Lots
potatoes.
of potatoes. We use a lot of potatoes in Indian cooking.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great to know. They've got a lot of beautiful varieties of potatoes here.
The apples are all coming in now.
Right. Apples, and it looks like pears here, right?
Yeah.
Some beautiful pears. There's an unbelievable abundance here of fruits and vegetables and the root vegetables. Oh, look at these beautiful peppers. We've got some really, really good things.
Them if the corn is also on its last. I don't know when the corn season gets over.
Okay. So yeah, looking at the tomatoes, black heirloom. Look at that. That's pretty awesome. Are you using peppers in your cooking?
We use peppers in our cooking. I'm just not very fond of bell peppers, so I don't use it a lot, but we use some. The colored varieties are not generally available in India, but the green pepper we use a lot.
Oh, do you? Okay, that's amazing. Do you tend to find that you're roasting them a little bit more, or?
There's not a lot of roasting in Indian cooking. I
Okay.
mean, we cook them, saute them, and we fill them, stuff them also.
Okay.
And at home we would stuff them, but not a lot of roasting.
Not a lot of roasting.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Oh, wow.
So this is the maitake mushroom.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's one set of
beautiful.
the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Then in this one, you've got the king oyster or trumpet,
Mm-hmm.
the piopini, the lion's mane, and then here you have the regular oyster as well as the yellow oyster.
What's the difference?
Basically the same flavor. This one's a little lighter in texture. They're thinner
Mhm.
petals, and it's a little nuttier to some people.
I see.
And then you've got the shiitake here, and then the cremini, the baby portobellos, and then the full portobellos.
So is this like Queen's portobello stage? Is that what's the
They're a little bit different. They're in the same family, just not
Right.
the same strain.
That's
Okay.
amazing.
I've never had this. I've never had these two.
The piopini is a great one, especially to replace if you don't use the stems with your shiitakes because they're a little fibrous for most people.
Yeah.
This one you can eat the whole stem on, and it's very woody
Ooh,
shiitake
good to know.
flavor. Like this one. And then the lion's mane is a great one. It has very good memory antioxidants, so it's very good for patients with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Oh, for us who are getting there.
Exactly, same. And it's also a very light crab meat flavor, so people might go into
Interesting.
vegetarian crab cakes.
How would you use them in cooking?
They're very light and buttery, so they normally don't mix very well with the heavier ones. But I make it kind of like a cauliflower steak.
Ah.
Slice it down and sear those little patties. Just a little bit of butter and salt, and
And then
sometimes a
what do
little
you do? You
rosemary.
make them what?
That's perfect.
Like some for the house.
I'll pick up a couple.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's see.
How do you see? How do you pick?
I'm going by weight on this one. Marion, do you have any recommendations?
Yep, something a little heavier is better.
So why is it better?
We know there's a little more flesh in there, that the inside cavity isn't too wide. Mhm.
That's clever.
You don't want it to be too hollow in the center.
Mhm.
I've never seen so small cabosas.
They must have just come into season. Ooh, acorn squash. I guess we could feature just one in the dish that we're doing.
Yeah.
We could do that.
Kabocha and eggplant is a great combo.
Ooh, let's give it a try. Perfect. Let's go down to the eggplant. Ooh, look at these purple potatoes.
Very good. What kind of potatoes do you want to get?
Mhm. I'm a sucker for the color here, but do you have any recommendations?
I don't know. I'm not. When I've had the purple potatoes, I haven't had great success.
Okay.
But I don't know the other potatoes. We should.
Here you go, Nidhi. Well, I was liking the idea you had with the kabocha and the eggplant.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm liking that graffiti eggplant that I saw.
I like my favorite is the Asian eggplant, the Japanese one, but I don't know if these are the Japanese ones. You like this one?
Just has a different looking outside.
Yeah.
Flavor-wise, it should still be similar. Ooh, there's the ginger.
Watch your back.
Let me get one. Here you go, Nidhi.
Okay.
Look at that. This is what it actually looks like when you get it from the ground.
That's wonderful.
And I'm sure it's going to have quite a zesty taste. Not that a ginger in the supermarket isn't the same, but this is a lot fresher. You know it's at the peak flavor. So we've got our eggplant, we've got our kabocha squash, we've got our potatoes, and our ginger.
Yeah.
All right. What kind of spices are you thinking of mixing this with to make a dish?
We use a very simple, we use turmeric, we use fennel, like a seed mixture with fennel and nigella seeds. And but you could also just use cumin.
All right. Oh, that's pretty. Look at those golden beets. Well, you said you cooked it in mustard oil. Would you recommend mustard greens?
We can add mustard greens.
I think a watercress would probably be really good with it.
It would be peppery, yeah.
That could add a nice little zing. That could play off nicely with the ginger.
Exactly.
That might be really nice. Yeah.
You can almost see it has a little bit of a similarity to a broccoli. You could see the flowering buds right there. I'll get that then. And so are you thinking that we'll just saute all of the vegetables, cut them up, almost kind of like a stew?
Like I mean, it's not wet, but it's all sauteed.
All right.
Yeah.
Would you use a vegetable stock with it?
You don't have to use any stock with it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Hi, I'm Nidhi. I'm from Masala Mama, and I'm a chef and entrepreneur. At Masala Mama, we make sauces for Indian food that are easy, healthy, and delicious. So today, I'm going to show you how to. It's a take on a Bengali dish called Chorchori. It's a mixed vegetable dish, traditionally made with 5 vegetables. Today, we're going to make it with squash. With a kabocha squash, but you can use any squash, eggplant, and some spinach, and it's flavored with ginger. This is like an Indian spice box, but we're going to use 2 spices in this. One is turmeric and one is red chili powder, so you can control how much you want. And of course, I had mentioned ginger. And we cook this dish in mustard oil traditionally. You could use any oil, but if you're not using mustard oil, I would say add some mustard powder to it, to the dish. And the Bengalis use this really beautiful spice mixture called panch phoron, which means 5, like 5 spices. It's got fennel, fenugreek seeds, mustard seeds, cumin seeds, and nigella seeds. So in India, we use a technique called chonk or tadka. So we heat the oil and put the spices in it, and it flavors the whole oil. And sometimes that's all the flavoring you need. It's really great. So let's begin. I'm going to put on my thing to like a medium high. Add some mustard oil. And wait for it to get hot, right? Mustard oil has a really pungent, nice smell. And you can add, so these 2 ingredients are a must in this dish, the eggplant and the eggplant and the squash. And I cut it all. So I used equal proportions of eggplant and squash. And then in the end, I'll add spinach, but you can also add chickpeas to it if you want. You can add cauliflower, you can add radish, like a whole radish, horseradish, things like daikon, sorry, I meant daikon. Okay, we're waiting for the oil to get hot. So these are all the basic spices that we use. There's cumin seeds, coriander, red chilies. This is raw mango powder, turmeric, red chili powder, and mustard seeds. Like this is the most commonly used spices in the Indian pantry. So it's very important that the oil is hot when we put the chunk of the whole seeds, because it crackles right away. So once I have the seeds in my hand, I do this a little bit just to release flavor, and I put it in the hot oil and I wait for it to crackle. If you want, you can add some dry red chilies to this if you like spicy food. That also flavors the oil. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's like makes a crackling noise and the seeds get a little bit darker. Once it crackles, I add equal quantities or approximately equal quantities of the eggplant and the kabocha squash that I've cut up. And while you're cooking this, if you want, you can start making your rice. So it'll be ready by the time the dish is cooked. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. I like to add salt various stages of the cooking, and a little bit of haldi, like turmeric. Just a little pinch. I'm actually going to cover it and let it cook in its own steam for a few minutes. This dish doesn't use a lot of oil, but it's a bit seared, but a bit what do you call it, ghata ghata, meaning a little bit mishy mashy, like not really separate, but a little mishy mashy. It tastes really nice when it's like that. I think it's good. I'm going to add so the vegetable should be almost cooked before you add the spinach. So I'm going to add the spinach. It will wilt down to, it looks a lot, but it will wilt down to nothing. I'm going to add the ginger, and I'm going to add some red chili powder. And maybe a little bit more salt. Now I'm going to mix it and flour it and cook some more. Oh, be careful, all flying off. Maybe I'll just let it wilt a little bit before I mix it. Already it's wilted. You can actually add more spinach, more greens. I just use baby spinach, but actually whole spinach or whole proper is great. It's great to make lentils with this dish in any form, or chickpeas is great. Maybe next time we'll do a masala dal. So it's almost done. Voila. It's great, it's done. The spinach just needs to be a little bit soft and wilted, and you have dinner. Thank you. I hope you enjoy cooking this dish.
Hi everybody! So we're back from Plaza, and that was a really nice visit. We got an opportunity to see a lot of vegetables there, a lot of different fruits. More than that though, you could see all sorts of different types of foods there. I definitely say that that's worth a trip for anybody who might be interested in taking a trip down there after seeing our footage, because quite frankly, they're open year-round. It might be a good place to visit, especially if your local markets have closed. So here's a little bit of the harvest bounty that we picked up while we were down there. We've got some cranberry red potatoes over here. I've got a kabocha squash in the center. I've got a really pretty fresh ginger over here. Usually you don't see it this fresh. When you see it in the supermarkets, the skin is actually dried out a bit, so it turns a little bit brown. In the back over here, I've got a graffiti eggplant. You could see the different variations in color there, hence the name. On my right over here, I've got some mustard greens, nice and fresh. I want to show you a quick and easy take on how to use these vegetables, and I guess we can call what I'm about to do a fall harvest vegetable and spice saute. So I am inspired by Chef Nidhi and the opportunity that we had to talk about some of the foods that we were looking at the market, and honestly, even beforehand, I'm also inspired by having tasted some of her foods. She came and visited one of my schools where we did a tasting demonstration with the students there. So I'm thinking about the spices that she uses, and I've got a couple of Indian-inspired spices right here. I've got some curry powder on the side over here. I've got some cumin. And what I'm going to do with these two spices is that I'm going to take them and bloom them to start making my dish. What does it mean to bloom, you might ask? Well, think of how a flower blooms in the spring. The flower opens up, it unfurls its petals, and spreads itself out. And in just a moment, you'll see how I'm going to do that with the spices in this pan. Alright, so to bloom my spices, I start by turning on my pan on low on an induction pad. It's just like a stove, but it runs on electricity. I'm going to add a tablespoon of oil to my pan right now. Don't want the pan to be too hot. Temperature control is important in this next step. Actually, I might add half a tablespoon more. Now, the bloom spices, you're essentially cooking them in a little bit of oil over a little bit of heat. And what that's going to do is that it's going to allow the flavors to be infused into the oil. That spreads out the flavor, the aroma, it all gets transferred into the oil, and that allows that flavor from the curry powder and from the cumin we're about to use to just penetrate into the food, to add a nice depth of flavor into our meal. So, a little bit goes a long way when you're blooming spices. Alright, so now I'm starting to smell my olive oil, and I know that this is about ready. I don't want to go too hot while I'm cooking, simply because I want these spices to have an opportunity to cook properly. If it's too hot, it's going to get burned. So, I'll start by putting my half teaspoon of curry powder into my oil, and I'm also going to add a half teaspoon of cumin as well. Here's a closer look at what our spices look like as they're blooming. As I stir this around a little bit, our oil is starting to take a little bit of a yellowish tint to it, and that's coming from the turmeric that was mixed into our curry powder. Now as we let that sit and heat up, it's going to slowly release the flavor and aroma of the spices into the oil, and I can actually start to smell that just a little bit. It's actually rather fragrant. Well, I'm going to get all of my mise en place ready. I'll prepare all of my vegetables for the next step. And what I'll start off with first will be just working with my tomatoes. I've got canned tomatoes over here, and I'm going to open them up and strain them. We'll reserve a little bit of that liquid because we might be able to use some of that a little later. But for now, I'm going to take my tomatoes, let them drain for a moment, and we will come right back to that. And I'll shake it up just a little bit to make it pass through the colander a little easier. To continue my mise en place, I'm going to work with my kabocha squash next. Now this kabocha squash has got a bit of a tough skin. We always say that there are vitamins in the skins of some of our vegetables. However, in this case, I'm going to peel this off. It's going to let the kabocha squash cook a little quicker, and it's going to be a lot more tender that way. And to spare us the trouble of seeing that on camera, I've already peeled my kabocha squash right here. What I'm going to do is cut it into a dice. So to do that, I'm just going to trim off the ends of my kabocha squash. This squash is a lot stiffer than I thought it was going to be. So rather than do something that might be a little bit dangerous for myself, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach here. Using my bear claw on top, I'm just going to cut myself a flat edge on the side of this squash. Don't have to go too deep, but I just want a surface that'll allow me to stand up my squash to finish cutting through without risking having my squash roll over on me or cause an accident. And with my flat edge, I'll just go the other way and cut off where the root came into the squash. Good kitchen hack is to always have a waste bowl on the side for yourself. That way you're not running to the garbage frequently. Now that I've got my squash on this end, you can almost see some of the seeds that are in the center of the squash right there. I'll give you guys a closer look in just 1 second, because the next thing I'll do, with this side that's a little flatter, is cut my kabocha squash in half. Here's what those seeds look like on the inside. Oh, going by the smell of it, I think our curry is just about bloomed. I'm just going to cut off my induction burner because we don't want that to overcook. In the meanwhile, though, I'm going to take these seeds out with a spoon. And I'm really just going to scoop around the edges here. Take this and toss them into my waste bowl. Now that I've got my squash, I'm going to cut it into dice. And if you could see, the squash is actually coming into a little bit of an arc-like shape. So with these individual slices, these half moons, the safest way to cut is to go ahead and cut them individually into my dice from there. And the dice could be about a medium dice, not too big, not too small. I'll take these pieces and just cut them down in size. And now my kabocha squash is all cut up. And I'm thinking that might have been a little bit on the firmer side because it wasn't completely ripe. Usually you let those sit out for a little bit. We did this just a couple of days after we went to the market. So let me put this all on the side. We'll come back to this a little bit later. The next thing that I'm going to do is work with my potatoes. Now these potatoes are called cranberry red potatoes. That's because they've got a little bit of a surprise inside, and I'll show that in just a moment. To show you what I'm going to do with my potato, I am going to peel it. Now, a lot of nutrients are in the skin of the potato. There's a lot of B vitamins there. It's a little bit of a decent source of fiber. But in order to make the potato more tender, to make it cook quicker, just like the kabocha squash, I'm going to peel this off. And I'm going to trim mostly to the ends there. I'll just snip off the ends with my knife. And to cut these, because they're already on the smaller side, I'm just going to take off the ends and cut them into slices. And this is where you get to see that cranberry color right here. The inside is just a little bit pinkish, almost like an actual cranberry. I'm really excited to see how these will taste compared to other similar potatoes. So I'll take these, slice it. Yes, with this one, I could get one more slice out of it. You could see that beautiful color right there. So I'll take my potatoes and I am going to put them on the side. with my other potatoes here, just as I get ready to cook. A nice kitchen hack for you all at home is if you have potatoes that you're cutting a lot of, you can put them in water just to keep them from browning. You don't have to add any lemon juice like you would as if it was an apple. But since we're about ready to start cooking, I'm going to take these, strain them out, and we'll just give them a little opportunity to drain. We don't want a lot of extra water to come into the potatoes, especially when we introduce that to the oil. So, on to the next order of business. The next thing that I'm going to cut up is going to be my graffiti squash. This graffiti squash, compared to a regular eggplant that you might see in the store, the Italian eggplant, is going to be a little more tender. The skin's a little bit thinner. I'm not going to peel it off because of that. It's going to cook down in a little bit in the oil. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to just push my knife in, cut off my end here. That'll go to the compost. Cut it off on the other side. And now I'm going to cut my eggplant in half. And I'm going to cut some half moons out of this. So slices right down the side here. Cut it about that size. And you're going to lose the color of that eggplant as you cut and cook it. However, that flavor's still going to be there, and that texture is going to be carried over into the final dish. So, all right, my eggplant's cut. I'm going to put it with the rest of my mise en place over here. Beautiful little half moons. And the next thing I'm going to move on to is my ginger. Now, a little bit goes a long way with this ginger. And doesn't this look really, really pretty? You almost never usually see ginger just like this. That's how you know that it's fresh. You see the almost yellowish skin there. So I'm going to take off the top of my ginger here. I'll just pull that one right off. For most of the others, you would have to take it with a knife. And rather than take a peeler like this one to peel into my ginger, I want to teach you all a little fun fact that I learned in culinary school. The most efficient way to peel ginger in a way that preserves a lot of its health-promoting benefits is to take the back of a spoon and just lift the skin off just a little bit. A little easier to see when you are doing this with a regular piece of ginger, because you could see the contrast from the brown skin and the golden flesh a little more easily. But the reason why I'm doing this is because those health-containing compounds in the ginger are generally found just right under the skin. And using a regular peeler, you'll actually lose some of those helpful benefits because they're being peeled right off of the skin as you cut into the ginger. And that's about it for peeling my ginger. Now that I've got this really fragrant piece of ginger, it's not a lot, I'd say about an inch. It's a 1-inch knob here. I'm going to take this and I'm going to mince it. And so I'll cut it up into little tiny slices first and just pass over it with my knife. With the tip on my cutting board, I'm just going to come up and down just a little bit. And I just want to break it down nice and small like I would with garlic so that the flavor of the ginger can permeate with my spices once I turn that back on. It does get a little sticky, just like garlic. And it is really, really fragrant. I wish you guys could smell this. And I think that that's good enough. We've minced up our ginger, and I think that it's time to get cooking. All of our mise en place is ready. So let me turn my heat back on here. And the first thing I'm gonna do is work with my potatoes. Now we did rinse those, so a nice kitchen hack that I'm gonna show you guys is that in order to prepare the potatoes to be added into oil, we're going to take them, put them into a little bowl with some paper towel. That way we can just make sure that our potatoes are nice and dry. So I'll just pat them right on top, give it a little shake there, just to catch any water that still might be on there. I don't want to splatter when I'm going to add these into the pot. So let me put that on the side, and now I'll add my potatoes in. At this point, I'm going to bring my heat up. Put those on a single layer just to make sure that they are making contact And the good thing about potatoes going in first is that they're going to soak up a lot of that flavor as they get cooked. All right, so the temperature's caught up with the pan. You can hear the potatoes cooking, and I'm just going to give this about 5 minutes to cook up, and then we'll add in the rest of our ingredients. It's been a couple minutes. Let's see how our potatoes are doing. Ooh, that looks yummy. It's got a nice little sizzle to it as well, too. So, don't be worried at this point. If you hear that little bit of sizzle and you see this brownness, it's not that the potatoes are overcooking. They've actually soaked up the seasoning from our cumin and our curry powder. So let's add in our next layer of flavor. I'm going to take a pinch of my ginger here. I'm going to sprinkle that in. And I'm going to stir that up. Alright. Making sure that my potatoes are in a single layer still, the next ingredient that I'm going to add is going to be our eggplant. And I'll take the little bit of eggplant that I have here. We'll add a little bit in. That ginger is really fragrant. And now when you're cooking with a lot of seasonings, you always want to layer your seasonings. The next layer of seasoning that I'm going to add, that next layer of flavor, is going to be 1 tablespoon of oregano. And I'll just evenly disperse it to make sure that everything's covered. Actually, I think that to make sure that this gets enough flavor permeated into it, I'm going to add my squash first into the pan, and then I'll cover it up. I'm not going to stir it now because I've got an even layer right there. And we'll just let the seasonings cook in nicely. We've had our pot covered just to make sure that there's been enough steam to cook down the squash. Now let's take a look at what we've got going on. It's pretty good. I think I'm going to add some tomato at this point. And a little bit goes a long way. I'm going to add just a few tablespoons at a time. And we'll give this a moment to cook down further. All right, we've had this cooking for about 10 to 12 minutes now, and let's take a look and see how everything is. Ooh, look at that steam. So I'm looking in here, I see that my eggplant's starting to get nice and soft, a little bit of liquid's getting released from the kabocha squash, but I've already cooked through some of the liquid, so I'm really glad that I reserved that tomato juice. And of course you could use a little bit of water, but using the tomato juice is going to add a little extra flavor. So I'm just going to add a little splash to it. I just want to cover the bottom. I'll put a little more on this side right here. I don't want to stir this up right now. I think that's good. And now, in addition to putting in my tomato juice, I think I'm going to add a little extra flavor, a little extra seasonings. I've got about a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic here. I'm going to add a little bit of garlic powder. And in addition to that, I'm going to add black pepper. Rather than do that with a 1/4 teaspoon measurement, I'm just going to add in a little dash, put that over the top, sprinkle that on in, and of course, add a little bit of salt for flavor. Just like the black pepper, I'm just going to take a little pinch, sprinkle that across the top. Now let's close this up and give these flavors just a little bit of time to melt together. So while I'm letting this cook for a little bit longer, why don't we talk about the star of the show, our squash right here. And there's no one type of squash, there's actually a variety of squashes. Did you guys know that pumpkin is actually a type of squash? Other types of squash besides this kabocha squash that you might see are acorn squash, butternut squash, delicata squash, and spaghetti squash. Keep an eye out for these in the supermarket and the farmer's market. You'll start to see a lot more of them as we start to get a little more into the harvest season. And you can all cook these very different ways. All of them will have seeds on the inside that you can core on out and roast for a nice little extra snack. And in general, squash is going to be a really good source of fiber. It's going to have a fair bit of vitamins in it. It's got some B vitamins for energy to make your body nice and strong. It's going to have a little bit of vitamin C inside as well too. And squash is going to be really nice in terms of what you can add it to. You could put it in a stew. You can make a soup out of it. You could saute it. You could bake it. You could roast it. You can cook squash any number of ways and add it into your meals. And being a seasonal vegetable, it's going to be something that's going to have a lot of flavor, and it's going to be something that's going to give our bodies particularly what they need for the season as we start to get a little bit colder, as we start to say goodbye to our tomatoes and our cucumbers and all of those summer vegetables that we saw earlier in the season. So let's take a look at what we've got going on. This has got a couple minutes to cook. And at this point, I believe I'm going to stir everything in. You know, we weren't stirring this before, but we're at the point where we can move our veggies around and get that tomato paste from the top mixed in. I'm sorry, pureed tomatoes, not tomato paste. And this smells amazing. So I've given this a nice little stir. I think that this could use a touch more juice in it. So I'll use the rest of my juice here. And if I need a little more liquid, I can move over and use some water at this point. But let me just make sure that it's making contact with the bottom of the pan. And we're almost about finished with our meal. So now we're going to we've saved the most delicate part of our vegetables for last. We're going to use these mustard greens that we've got here, and we're going to just take a couple of them. Mustard greens are actually related to broccoli, cauliflower, kale, a lot of vegetables that you will see coming up in the fall and winter season. Turn down my flame because I want to talk a little bit about these mustard greens. You don't usually see these around a lot of supermarkets. Even in the farmers markets, I haven't seen these in the Bronx yet. But this plant has basically been grown for over 2,000 years. It originated in the area of modern-day Turkey, and this is actually the predecessor or the plant that came before all of the other plants that we would call crucifers today. So our broccoli, our cauliflower, our cabbage, our Brussels sprouts, our kohlrabi are all descended from this plant because back in the day, people who were growing all of these different types of plants were actually growing them for their different parts. In the case of broccoli, if you look up close right over here, you can kind of see some of the buds that you might see on the top of a flowering of broccoli. And in the case of broccoli, the mustard plant was grown over and over again. Different varieties of mustard plants were picked that had larger flowering buds, and it was basically grown for its flowers until we got to the point where we had a plant that was resembling modern-day broccoli. The same could be said for cauliflower as well. In the case of kale, you can kind of see that the leaves of this mustard plant look a little bit like kale. In that case, that variety of wild mustard was grown over and over again to have bigger and bigger leaves. All of them in general give us a lot of B vitamins, a lot of what are called sulforaphanes. Basically, these are sulfur-containing compounds that are really good for our health, but do make the plant a little bit bitter. So we're not going to use a lot of these. We're going to use it almost as a garnish, just to give a little bit of color and just a little bit of flavor. And I'm not even going to chop this all up that much. I'm just going to take it, just cut it into a couple of small pieces, and I'm going to put that on top to finish off my harvest plate here. And I'm going to use another Indian spice, but it's one that we're all familiar with, and that's going to be our cinnamon. And we're going to do something special. I'm going to take my microplane grater, and I'm actually just going to grate out a little bit of cinnamon. Less is more in this case, and I don't want the cinnamon to be overpowering, so I'm just going to grate a little bit in to add a little touch of sweetness that will just play really beautifully with the curry powder and the cumin that I previously added. And we're just going to let this cook for a little longer. We want that cinnamon to have a chance to get soaked in and get a little bit of flavor melding with all the other flavors that we've got in the pot, and that's all there is to it. That is our fall harvest veg and spice saute. Only one thing left to do, and it's the single most important thing that a chef can do. That's to taste the food and make sure that it's the way that we want it to come out. So I'll just take a little scoop. I'll take a little piece of the eggplant. we'll try it. That is really good. No one spice is really overpowering the other. You get a little depth of flavor from the spices that we bloomed, a little touch of the oregano, and at the very end, I'm getting a little bit of the sweetness of cinnamon there. So I'm really glad that I didn't grate up too much there. And that's all there is to it. Of course, at this point, if you feel like you need to adjust the flavors, you can add a little bit more seasoning. Maybe you might think it needs a little more salt. Maybe you might think it needs a little more pepper. You can always taste and readjust from here on out. So I just want to give a quick round of thanks to Grow NYC for allowing us to come to the Grand Army Plaza, to come and talk to the market managers, as well as in all the other farmers markets that we've been to, Parkchester, Borough Park. We're really glad to have the opportunity to talk about all the foods that are in season there and to give all of our viewers an opportunity to take a little trip with us around the Bronx and beyond. I also want to give a little bit of thanks to Chef Nidhi Jalan of Masala Mama, especially for inspiring this dish and joining us and going to the market and picking up vegetables that would provide us with an authentic Indian-inspired dish. So thank you all for watching. I'm happy that you've tuned into this Bite of Wellness, and I hope to see you soon.